Hello, welcome back to the RC Pilot's Log. I'm Rob. I hope everyone is still safe and well, and I hope you're enjoying this series so far. I've made some progress off camera over the last week, and as you can see, the DC-3 build is really starting to take shape. Both wings are complete, minus the aileron and flap on this side, because I'm waiting for some hinges, and I've mounted the motors with the correct 6x4 3-blade master air screw propellers. I'm using Turnigy D282610 1400 kV motors on some Hobby King 40 amp ESCs with built-in SBECs. They're a little bit overkill for these motors, but I suspect I may have to put larger motors on here. And these parts were from the ill-fated ATR72 I was building, which I tripped over and destroyed. So I'm making use of them, and I will upgrade if I need to. Like I say, I suspect I may need to upgrade the motors. I did some basic thrust tests, and on 3-cell I was getting about 550 grams per motor with these props. On a 4-cell, however, I'm getting over 800. The amps are still within specification for the motors and ESCs, however the voltage is obviously higher, so I just need to be aware that on full throttle I may be putting a bit of stress on them. But that's an option if it's underpowered when I come to maiden it. So today I'm hoping to mount the landing gear and route the wires through the centre wing section and get an idea of how they're going to fit, as well as start finishing the left side wing here, or the right side from your view, getting that with some lightweight filler in it, or spackle as they call it in Europe, and thinking about the fibreglass skin, and also look at getting a skin on this centre section. But for now, I'm really pleased. I've got the 5 degrees dihedral, or it's turned out to be just under 5 degrees dihedral on the wings. I still need to add the reinforcement on this wing. I've got it here, a plywood reinforcer that locks into the ribs and sets the dihedral that side. I need to do the same on this side, but for now, I'm really pleased with that. The wingtips are not exactly symmetrical left to right. They're very close, but actually I don't think it's going to cause too much of an issue, and I think they look really good. So there's the full wing there. There's a couple of areas I want to reinforce. I want to put a strip of ply just across the inner section here, where I've recessed into the trailing edge for the flap servo horn, for the flap control horn. It's very weak across this thinner section, and actually if I flex the wing, it's flexing here. So a small strip of ply just across there will be hidden by the fuselage, but also reinforce that quite nicely on the top. And I also want to increase the surface area around the motor mount plates onto these booms, and I can epoxy some wedge shape pieces of balsa around here. Won't encroach too much on the space I'm going to be using for mounting the ESCs, and will increase that surface area and therefore the hold and the hold strength on that plate, so that shouldn't take too long. Just a nice thick bit of 5mm ply, just about a centimetre wide, to epoxy on the back there, and add some strength. I made 6 of these little balsa blocks, 3 for each side. One will tuck behind the mount that way, and 2 will go on the sides like that. That should reinforce it very nicely, but also keep it nice and light, which is what we want. So I'm going to epoxy those on, and the trailing edge reinforcement as well, and let that cure. 5-minute epoxy, so that won't be long. So those reinforcements are now glued in place. I'm really pleased these motor mounts are nice and strong now. I'm going to start thinking finally about the landing gear, because that's the last thing that needs to be considered in this inner section before I can put the skin on it. So a few episodes back, first episode I think, maybe the second, I started putting together these struts with the foam wheel, the 8mm carbon tube with a 2mm carbon rod axle, and they'll be nice and strong, they'll be sturdy enough. I may put some sort of bracing in here to make it look a little bit more scale, but they're going to be fixed and not retract, and I will probably brace them backwards like the scale plans show, that when they retracts they have a folding arm that triangulates it when it's fully extended. So they're going to go through the bottom of the wing here, and I'll build some structure to brace them into this corner here. But I have just had a thought, and it's probably not going to be possible this time round, but I've got these springs that I had lying around, and they fit nicely inside a 10mm tube. The 8mm tube has a 10mm outer diameter, and it fits very snug inside the 10mm tube, and gives you some spring, some suspension there. These springs are probably a little bit tough, but I think what I need to do, maybe for a future model I can use this idea, I'd need to make a slot in here in the outer one with a pin in the inner one that I would put through, so that would give a limit and stop it dropping out. Just a thought, I won't do it for this model. I will use a bit of this 10mm to brace these into the block, and I'll probably tap a screw into there so that I can make these removable should I need to in the future. So I'm going to brace this inside between the ribs with a couple of pieces of this 5mm ply. 5mm, it is going to be a bit heavier than it needs to be. I could probably use 3mm, but I've always had trouble with landing gear breaking on any model I've built, so I'm going to go overkill on this. I'm going to put some 5mm ply in there, and glue in the, look at that, just when you don't want it. Hello! So yeah, I'll use the 5mm to brace in across there, and I'll cut some short sections of the 10mm carbon that will be used to mount the 8mm struts into. So hopefully that will work out and I can do that on both sides. Okay, so here's the plan for the landing gear. I've mounted these ply blocks, 5mm ply in between the ribs and the leading edge, mounting on the engine boom spars, and I've cut the 10mm carbon into 2.5cm or 1-inch lengths, and I will tap a screw into each of those, glue the 10mm onto the spar, onto the reinforcement, sorry, and against the ribs, and probably box that in slightly, and then if it works I'll be able to undo the screws and pull the legs out should I need to. It may end up being that I just epoxy them in. In fact, I think I'll probably just epoxy them in because it's probably going to split with the screw, so I'll just epoxy those straight in and see how we go. Gonna have to try and make sure I get the wheel straight, but I can use the engine boom as my guide, and that should work out quite nicely. And it actually, the legs are touching tight against the engine boom, so I'm really pleased with that. So I will epoxy that in and do the other side. So the main gears are now epoxied in, really nice and solid, very well connected. I will box in just around the roots of the struts here, and just kind of pour some more epoxy in there just to make sure they're really solid, but I'm very, very pleased with those. Got a slight camber on each strut, leaning out very slightly to give it a bit more stability and help it track a bit truer on the ground should there be any issues. And I think actually it's a little bit more scale. I don't think they come exactly vertical, but as you can see, really nice looking landing gear there. Very pleased with those. I need to get a tail wheel. I haven't bought one yet the right size, but I will get one very soon. And get that in, but I think that's starting to look like a DC-3. I'm just going to start boxing in the joint of the struts into the wing, and I'm going to just use some more of this 5mm ply, brace across this way and then that way, and then I can epoxy around there as well, just to again add some more strength around that joint. But just going to trim 5mm ply down to fit, box in around both sides, and epoxy that in place. So thought I'd go for a quick weigh in. Currently sitting at 329 grams with the gear on, servos and servo leads in place. Going to be a fair amount more with the motors and ESCs, but when they're mounted up again I'll weigh that and see where it's sitting. I think I'm going to be probably pushing a kilo and maybe more. Hopefully I'll try and keep it at a kilo or under, and that will give me a really good power to weight ratio on 3-cell. If it's over a kilo then I will have to go 4-cell I think, or bigger motors, which again is going to put the weight up, but we'll see how it comes out. Next task is to start thinking about skinning the underside of the wing here, and I plan to do that just by cutting the deperon to fit inside each wing, and and then taper it back into the trailing edge with the flaps there. So we'll give that a few goes and see how I get on. Okay, so the wing's all sheeted and I've given it 2 coats of lightweight fast filler. This stuff is very, very light and it fills in quite well, but it's quite tricky to sand without gouging it out. So I'm going to let that set overnight so it's properly hard, and then tomorrow I can flat that and sand that off. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to glass the top half of this wing up to the centre section here and around the leading edge and around the gaps, just to make sure that's all set and solid. Just a single sheet of the 24-ounce glass I've got, single layer of that, and see how that works, and then I'll flip it over, do the same on the underside, and we should have one solid wing then. I'm still waiting for hinges for the right excuse me. I'm still waiting for hinges for the right hand wing, so that will have to wait, which is why I'm pushing ahead with this wing and get this one finished and glassed and running correctly. Okay, so it may not look it on camera, but this is actually really quite smooth now and even. There's a couple of low spots, just one just here on the wing. Whoops, so got a little bit of a high spot there that flatted through the filler, but that's now flush with the surrounding area. There's a little bit of low spot here and a little dip around between these ribs here where the Depron has sunk in slightly. So I'm going to add a little bit more filler in there and let that cure. So I cleared my workbench because I'm going to start an attempt at skinning the top half of the wing I've just finished filling. Now I bought these parts from Easy Composites. This is 23 grams a square metre glass, and it's an epoxy coating resin and hardener. I actually went ahead and bought these while I had an email query outstanding with them, and they actually suggested a different resin for finishing a model. However, this is a coating resin. It is 3:1 mixed by weight, working temperature 20 degrees ambient, and it's a tacky recoat stage within 2 hours, and a full cure within 8 hours. This is the first time I've done any glassing, so it could go horribly wrong, but the only way to learn is to really have a go, I think. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut out some of this cloth to fit around the wing. I bought a lot because if it goes well, I will obviously start glassing the Casa C101 project in the corner there, the Aero Tetris project. If you haven't seen that, check out the other videos. So I've got about 7 or 8 meters length of this, and it's about a meter, or just under a meter wide. So I'm going to cut some of this to fit the wing, see how we get on. Obviously I'm not going to need much here at all because I'm only doing the top of it. So these scissors are terrible. I'll be back. I've upgraded to the wife's fabric scissors with her permission. Wouldn't dare do it without. And let's see, tons better. Decent pair of scissors, cuts this like no problem. Okay, so we'll go across from there. Like I say, this is my first time ever working with fibreglass. It's probably quite an ambitious thing to do, but I'm up for trying it. I don't see any reason why, with some care and attention, I can't achieve a good result. I mean, this is really thin stuff here. Well, I don't think there's any way to do it other than just to do it. So while that fibreglass is curing outside, I'm going to think about getting this rudder control sorted, working out where to place the servo. I want to place it quite far up so as to keep the weight off the tail. So I'm looking probably around mid-wing section, and then routing the push rod through a tube to the tail. Well, this has been a really long episode, so thank you for sticking with me. Current progress is as you see it now. The left-hand wing has been glassed, and that's got a really nice hard shell to it now. Just the top of the wing there. I ended up glassing over the hinges by accident, got them full of resin, so I've had to cut those off, and I'll have to remake the aileron and reposition the hinges. I've also cut the aileron in the right-hand wing. I've started putting the filler on that to get that smooth and ready to glass tomorrow. What I'll do is once I've redone the hinges on both sides, I'll do another thin coat glass on top and glass the bottom, and that should then be the wing pretty much ready. I need to reinforce the landing gear and finish off with a few bits and pieces, but thanks so much for watching. Sorry it's been a long one, sorry if I've waffled a bit. But I hope you have a really good Easter, stay safe and stay well.